So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Elizabeth Herron. She's Vice President of Solution and Sales with Collegiate Admission and Retention Solution, or CARS. In her role, Elizabeth works with institutions to identify the needs of their students and prospective students and design outreach campaigns to drive student success. She also provides leadership training and development within CARS, as well as for many colleges and organizations throughout higher education. And I will say Elizabeth and CARS are longtime supporters of our mission and our annual professional development conference. Elizabeth, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We're so excited to have the webinar to kick off the first day of spring. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thanks to all of you, 203 and climbing people who have decided to spend an hour of your day with me today. We're going to have some polls throughout the workshop. For any of you who've ever been in a workshop with me before, you know that I love audience participation, and it's harder to get that participation and get that engagement going when we're all remote. So rest assured, I'll be at the PDC in Long Beach in September. So mark your calendars and come to whatever workshop I'm doing there so we can have that one-on-one time together. But the goal for today is really just to talk about supporting students and student success. And so really I'm going to zero in on retention and talk about strategies that you could start this month. So our outcomes for today, we're going to review key risk factors. You're going to receive a framework to measure and improve student outcomes. We're going to identify maybe some new ways for some of you experts out there. Maybe some of these aren't new ways, but maybe you'll hear a little twist on a way you're already using. And then we're going to explore ways to use scarce resources. There's probably not a single person out there who feels like, oh yeah, we're like overstaffed. We got people sitting around eating bonbons, right? We're all feeling that crunch of employment challenges keeping our staffing full. And so recognizing that we've got scarce resources, we're going to talk a little bit about how you triage the needs of your students to support them using a broader breadth of resources than just using student services. So we're also going to have some fun. We would have more fun if we had a beach ball and we were all standing in a room together. But again, come to Long Beach in September and maybe we can do that. So I first wanted to talk about who's here today. I am so honored by the fact that we have 39 states and territories represented. We have over 400 people registered for the workshop today. So far, 200 and some of you have logged in, so that's great. And with the initial reg list, there were over 200 different colleges and organizations that registered to come here together today to talk about student success. And I think regardless of what we see in the newspaper, or hear in the media about the fact that colleges don't care about students, that we're all in it just for the money. Most of us that have worked in higher ed for a while realize there isn't a lot of money to be made in higher ed, and we're obviously here for the students. That's what makes us tick. So why do we care about student success? There's a bunch of reasons that we care about student success, not the least of all that we want to help those human beings. But some of the key reasons that we care about student success, in my opinion, and when I ask folks all around the country about this, the first is that it's our mission, it's our goal, it's what makes us tick, right? All of us are here because we care about students. It's what we do. It's to serve our community, our nation, our employers. It's providing a valuable resource to your employers, to the community, whether it's nursing or welding or truck driving, whether it's IT system support. These are all necessary occupations to keep our country ticking. So that's one of the key reasons as well. Partly, it's also our reputation. So we care about the outcomes of our students because they are a manifestation of what we do in the community with your employers, with what they do next after they leave your institution. So your reputation is directly tied to your students' success. And then last but not least is compliance. So your accreditors are going to care about your students' outcomes. Many of your states care about your student outcomes, BPPE, Texas, New York. A lot of these states are very, very focused on student outcomes. So in my opinion, these are the key reasons that you all care about student success and that we do too. So how do we drive student success when we have scarce resources? this visual, I think, really helps paint a picture of the student life cycle. I like to think about everything that we do and all the different parts of that wheel touching the student. And we all have like a role in working together to support students. And as that student is the center, they're the cog or the hub of the wheel, they interact with all of the different departments, right? And they get some things and we give some things at all of these different phases in the student life cycle. But every one of those individual interactions has an organic impact on the student and how they feel about themselves, how they feel about the curriculum, how they feel about their likelihood of success in the program and ultimately in the field. And so all of these different things affect the students. So how do they feel? What's their physical and mental wellness? Are they getting it? Are they getting the skills and the competencies? Do they feel good about it? What's their satisfaction? They feel engaged. Are they actually learning what they need to be learning academically and also the hands-on learning? So all of these things affect how the student feels about themselves, their self-confidence, their engagement with the curriculum, and the engagement with the school. So thinking about that whole student and the whole system is really, really critical. I've alluded to the whole school approach to student success for many, many years. And one thing that people sometimes ask me in my workshops is, well, we've experienced that if it's everyone's job, it's no one's job. And I do agree with that. There are times where if everyone says, oh yeah, we're all going to work on this together, but nobody has their name on the dotted line with a due date and a goal and an outcome that's expected of them, sometimes things can fall through the cracks. But if you just look globally, everyone does have a role in your student success from the very beginning with marketing and admissions, targeting the right student and then matching that right student to the right program at the right time in their life. And that directly is tied to the student's ultimate ability to succeed. And then that admissions team is sometimes the very first team that builds a rapport with the student. And they might identify some factors about the student that they think might cause challenges for the student. So making note of that in a CRM that can then be used by later team members to support that student through to their matriculation is really, really critical. Getting the student to enroll, to sit, right? Getting them into the classroom with the supplies and tools that they need, that is critical. Some students hit hurdles in that process and just walk away, or in the first month or the first 6 weeks, they hit hurdles and they just walk away. So it's understanding what hurdles might a student face so that you can anticipate them and support them, which gets down to the next bullet here in our picture, which is identifying risk factors prior to and during enrollment, supporting the student toward their goal. Like if you know student has housing insecurity or food insecurity or multiple children that they're responsible for taking care of, they maybe don't have the family support. All of these factors are going to contribute to their ability to succeed. So you're going to want to find ways to support them throughout the matriculation because you know that those risk factors exist. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The next bullet says develop rapport and maintain quality contact information with the student. Having multiple ways that you can communicate with a student is really, really critical. And we're going to talk about the importance of communication both before enrollment, while they're enrolled, and after they leave your institution. And then staying in touch. You're building a lifetime relationship with this student for many reasons. Number one is helping them with placement. Number two is helping them with student loan repayment. And number three, and almost more importantly, our students are sometimes our best resources for prospective students. Referrals are such a great way to keep that mission of your institution alive. So I see we've got a couple questions that have popped up. Michelle, if any of those questions are pertinent to the content we've covered so far, please share them with me.
Nope, they are all administrative just for me, so you can continue on.
Awesome. So your role in student success. Again, we talked about the student life cycle, but I'll just go over it really briefly here. So you attract, contact, visit with the student, get them to come to the campus, they apply, you get them to go through orientation, they enroll, they've got to learn and grow, then they wind their way through career development, sort of as they're getting ready to leave the nest, then they graduate and hopefully go off in the world, they give back to the institution. Maybe they serve as an alumni mentor. Maybe they come back and speak at career days and talk about the work that they're doing or the employer that they have. I'm sure that everyone who's on this webinar has had experience where some of the students who have left their institution reach back out to the institution and say, hey, we have X number of empty positions, or hey, we really need 3 more of this. One of the projects that we work on for clients is placement verification. And we frequently will get emails from employers where they'll say, hey, we have 3 surgical technologist vacancies coming up in the next month. Do you have anyone for us? And then I reach back out to the client for whom that inquiry came in. And so I'm sure that your students who are out there in the world of work reach back out to you and say, hey, we need more students. We're hiring in welding or truck driving, et cetera. So that's another critical role. But keeping your students, your graduates tied to the institution can help future students successful. Back here in just a second. So I would like to pause a minute and ask you, when are your students most at risk? And when I say at risk, I mean at risk for attrition. So go ahead, we'll take a couple of minutes here and answer this question. So first month, mid to late first term, failure to return to a second or subsequent term or module, or close to graduation when they're getting ready to enter the workforce and leave the nest. So I see lots of answers coming in here. It looks like a race car, actually. Like the little blue lines are racing one another. So we'll give it just another couple of minutes. The results so far are not surprising to me. And so I'll just discuss the results that have come in so far. We've got about 43% of those who responded have indicated that that the greatest risk for loss, for attrition, is in that first month. And the mid to late first term is creeping up behind that 42% at 31%. Failure to return to a second subsequent term or module, that's a lower percentage, that's 17%. I work with a fair number of community colleges as well, and they see a higher percentage there because re-enrolling for the next term is less organic than it is at a lot of your institutions. And then we have a tiny sub 10%, around 9% of you say that it's close to graduation when they have to enter the workforce. So I think we can go ahead and end the poll. We can just talk about those results a little bit. We've got, Michelle, do I end the poll or do you?
I ended the poll for you, and you should be able to see the results. All the participants can see it.
Okay, well, I just closed it because I just reviewed the results. Thank you. A little bit of a newbie here in these polls on Zoom. So it isn't surprising that a lot of students experience their greatest risk for attrition in that first month. And there's a lot that you can do to help them be better prepared for that first month when there's so much happening in their lives. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I did want to share anecdotally, every time I do a workshop on retention, I have people say, you know, we have some students who have done all the hard work, stuck with it, done the whole program, 1 year, 2 year, whatever it is. And when they're nearing the very end, they're nearing graduation, they get like cold feet. They get that fear of like, what if I'm not good enough? You know, when they have to start interviewing for jobs and they have to put themselves out there and leave the nest, leave that comfort where you guys have been providing so much support. And so we'll talk a little bit about what can you do for students at that point to make them feel prepared. And using alumni is a huge help in that area. So let me just go back here. Okay, so why do people pursue post-secondary education anyway? It's largely to better their life, right? To end up with some sort of improvement in their quality of life, ability to provide for their families, et cetera. This chart, I realize, probably is harder to see for some of you, but I think one of the important things is no matter what kind of post-secondary education you pursue, your life, you experience increased median earnings. So the bottom line on this chart represents people who have less than a high school diploma. Their median annual earnings in a 10-year period of time don't change very much. Whereas students who have completed high school, their median earnings change somewhat over 10 years. Some college no degree, they fare about just as well as high school students, which really emphasizes the importance of all of our work to keep students where they actually achieve the educational credential. I'm sure many of you saw the news article earlier, I guess it was last year, where they were talking about the millions and millions of students who have some credential, no degree or certificate, or they've started some sort of post-secondary education but not completed it. And we've got a lot of people out there who are in that situation, who feel like they've kind of like wasted their money. And then when you get to the gray line is people who have an associate's degree, and then the green is a bachelor's degree, and the blue is a master's degree. But there is the ability to improve your situation. So another interesting statistic is that people who have a bachelor's degree, or any college really, participate more in their communities. They volunteer more. They also tend to feel more satisfied with their job and say that their job aligns with their interests more. So going through that process where you're doing all the hard work to get the degree or credential actually improves your self-esteem and makes you a happier person. So that's pretty important. So I'm going to ask you another poll here, which is, what are the top 3 challenges your students face? Now, this isn't, this is mental health, physical health, financial challenges, work schedule conflict, academic preparedness, or family support. So you only are going to be able to pick 3 that are the top 3 that you hear from your students as you're meeting and greeting them and building that rapport. What are the top 3 that come up time and time again for your students? So we'll get these polling questions in. I know that since the pandemic, mental health challenges have been on the rise. And I don't know that anyone can purely say that we have had an increase in mental health challenges, or do we have an increase in awareness of the prevalence of challenges with mental health? And I don't know, it's a chicken egg question. It kind of doesn't matter. But there are many more people, I think, than ever before saying that they're having some challenges with mental health. And that can be anything for college students, college participants. It can be anything from, stress, anxiety, inability to juggle work-life balance, excessive use of drugs or alcohol to manage your stress or your anxiety. So a lot of those are things that come out in these questionnaires of students who are participating in post-secondary education. So it looks like our answers have slowed down a little bit here. We got a few more trickling in, which is great. We'll just give you guys a couple more seconds to answer this poll, and then we'll share the results. Awesome. We've got 77% of you have participated in the poll, almost 200 of the 254. So we'll go ahead and stop the poll. Let's just unpack these results a little bit. Not surprisingly, financial challenges are frequently come up as like the number one problem or challenge facing our students. And that can be anything from having to come up with gap financing between what they're eligible for student aid. It can be just the juggling of the costs of college with transportation or childcare. A lot of our students work at least part-time or sometimes full-time, which gets into the very next highest challenge, which would be the work schedule conflict. 73% of you said that that's in your top 3, and that is not surprising at all. Most of your students are probably working, even if they are a more traditional student, right out of high school. A lot of them are working at least part-time. I have a student who's a freshman in college, and he is working part-time to help finance his post-secondary education. And it is hard. So we'll talk a little bit about that as one of the larger challenges. And then We've got mental health at 48%. We've got academic preparedness at 41%. Um, and then family support at 35%. So those are not too far off, off of one another. Physical health is pretty far behind. Technology challenges with online learning or hybrid learning is pretty low. Dissatisfied with the program is a low answer for this group of folks. But academic preparedness is going to impact somebody's ability to gather the knowledge and information. It can impact their study skills if they've been out of the educational opportunities for a long time. They're coming back in. Maybe they've had a layoff at their job and they're having to reskill or retrain. I know that can be very challenging sometimes. And family support is a pretty big one for many, many folks, because if you are going to school in a hybrid environment and you are home, and whoever was supposed to help you with childcare no shows on you, and you're trying to learn your subject matter while at the same time trying to take care of your children, that becomes challenging. And I know a lot of us have maintained some amount of hybrid learning. And I hear time and time again when I do workshops that family support or lack of support presents a real challenge for our learners. I'm going to stop that share. So I'll just show you guys the results here. So we've got mental health at 48%, physical health 6%, financial 77%, work schedule conflict 73%, academic preparedness 41%, family support 35%, then technology 9%, dissatisfaction with the program 4%. For some of the technology challenges, I know a lot of communities have really expanded the stretch of their available Wi-Fi beyond libraries. I know here in Washington, D.C., our athletic fields all have free Wi-Fi. So we've really expanded the web of free Wi-Fi so that is a help. And a lot of my institutional partners will have like loaner laptops and things that they give out to students who might have a challenge with securing the necessary technology. So I'm going to stop that share. We'll get back to our presentation here. So you guys have named a lot of the key challenges that affect students. Let's talk about what do you need to be successful in supporting your students. You need people, a lot of people, an army of people. You need data and information to help you figure out the best way to support your students. You need some technology. You need multiple ways of reaching your students. Not everyone wants to talk on the phone. Not everyone wants to text or do Slate or do a chat group. And then you need a process or a system with a set of accountability measures so that the people whose job it is to do certain tasks do it, and a way to measure, is what we're doing making a difference? And if it's not, how do we tweak it to make a difference? So let's dive right in. This is my top 10 strategies to boost retention, broken down into those categories, okay? You need data. You need a risk identifier. Some people even go so far as to create a risk score. You see where I'm talking at identification of risk. I'm talking about subjective things and objective things. Subjective things could be like the grade point average from prior education when they come in. It could also be their Pell Index or EFC. And objective thing could be, hey, when I spoke to this student and enrolled them, they shared they've got multiple children that they have to take care of, or they shared that they're going to be using mass transit and they're a little concerned about that. That would be an objective risk factor that you identify for building that rapport. Risk scoring is where you take all the different risk factors that a student is facing and you come up with an amalgamated score that tells you where on that bell curve that student is. Are they a student who over here has tons of risk factors and it's going to take a lot of support to get them through? Or are they a student who has fewer risk factors and they're going to take less effort to get through the program? And then data, you've got to be looking at it on an ongoing basis, minimum term to term. And then I'd like you to look at your data in a granular way, and we'll talk about that. People, all the people are important. Every single person has a role to play in your students' success. When the admissions people build that relationship with your students, it doesn't end there. They should have a responsibility to keep checking in periodically with that student. And you can use your CRM to just have little check-ins, whether it's a text they send out or a first big exam period. Hey, I'm rooting for you. I know you can do this. And they can be just little check-ins, right? You've got to do proactive reaching out and reactive. You only reach out to people when they're not attending class or when their grades aren't doing well or when they've missed a deadline. They are going to stop responding to you. If you reach out to them proactively, hey, how are you? How are things going for you this week? I just wanted to check in. They're going to be more responsive to you. So you've got to be proactive at scheduled intervals and then reactive when there's a risk flag. And you've got to celebrate and recognize the people that are supporting your students at the same time as you're celebrating your students, right? You've got to celebrate students early and often. And then I have there with people, if you're not using your alumni and your employers early in the matriculation of your students, you're missing a big opportunity. We'll dig into all of these deeper in a little bit here. Process and technology, multimodal communication is critical. Not all students are going to answer the phone. Not all students want to text. Not all students are going to come to class. Students who are purely online need much more proactive outreach in a variety of ways, whether it's Zoom rooms or webinars or some of the other social media ways of building little teams and communicating. And then process. It's important for people to know who's responsible and how they're going to be measured and how to measure their success. So another poll. What are the top 10 risk factors that you evaluate? So this isn't what risk do your students bring with them, but I'd like you to rank the risk factors that you believe affect retention from the most to the least, 1 being the risk factor that affects your students the most, and 10 being the risk factor that affects your students the least. So you're going to want to scroll through all of these and read them all first, right? So that you know what are all the different risk factors here that we've got. We've got like young online, single parent, working full time, low GPA for prior education. So you're going to want to read these 10 risk factors and you're going to rank them, 1 being the one that you feel like impacts your students the most, 10 being the one that you feel like impacts your students the least.
Hey, Elizabeth, I was going to pop in while people are answering
Awesome.
this poll and just asked, as I was listening to you talk about reaching out to people proactively before there's a problem. I know we are all signed up for texts from various organizations that, either sales or something. What do you think is like, how much is too much? Sometimes you can have too much encouragement. Where is a good balance?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. First, if you're going to use text, you have to get your students to opt in. So I'll just throw that out there as a disclaimer. So, how much communication is too much for one person is not enough for another person. And so that is a delicate balance that you have to walk. And I know that when we partner with an institution and provide retention support, we have scheduled outreach, and I'll show you later in our session here, like when I think minimum you want to reach out to students. But if you think about like the trajectory of the student life cycle, before that first day of class, in that month before school starts, you're going to want some proactive outreach to assess like, hey, how do you feel about it? Are you excited? Do you have the tools you need? Do you know where your classes are? Do you know how to read your syllabus to know if you have an online class or an in-person class or some blended class? Have you come by the campus again to test your commute if you're using mass transit? So that's like some sort of check-in before class starts on top of any orientation is so vital. And then in the first week, there should be another proactive touch point, I think, at a minimum, just to say, hey, I care. Oh, you have this challenge here. Let me help you find the resource, right? Because some people, there's that imposter syndrome where people are concerned that they aren't like the right fit, or they feel embarrassed to ask questions because it reveals that maybe they're not that you don't belong, etc. And so I think the first week there should be proactive outreach beyond just your instructors or your teachers. Oops, sorry guys, didn't mean to do that. But it's important, like when you're checking in on somebody and they say, hey, things are going great, thank you so much. And you say, okay, I'm going to call you again in another 2 or 3 weeks and just check in on you, or hey, I'd love to meet with you in another 2 or 3 weeks. And they say, I think I'm really good, but can I come to you if I have problems? That's like an easy way to do it. So you give people the opportunity to like opt out of the proactive warm fuzzies if they want to. So that is a way to do it. Obviously, the reactive outreach, if somebody's not attending class or is doing poorly with their academics, again, that outreach is, what can I do to help you? What is preventing you from making the grades that I know you're capable of, or attending class, et cetera, and then help triage their problem. So I'm going to be honest here, and I'm going to ask Michelle to jump back in again. I think we should close the poll because we've slowed down here. I don't know how to read this, so I
do. I'm happy to help.
cool, because I see a lot of colors, and I presume I've asked people to rank something as 1 most important, 10 least important, but I don't know what all of these colors represent. So if Michelle could guide us through this, that would be awesome.
I'm happy to translate. So it looks like the most impact from our attendees with 40% was working full time. And the least impact appears to be part-time enrollment, or actually, I'm sorry, ethnic background.
Okay.
So we've got, I mean, it runs the gamut, but I would, and then there's
And so while Michelle's looking at this, when we record the session and we provide access to the recording for folks, do the poll questions and answers become some sort of addendum to it, or is that separate?
I believe it's separate.
Okay, cool. So maybe that I can get that and dig in a little bit to it after the workshop and provide some analysis as well.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And it looks like the next coming in after working full time are low EFC, low income, and then followed quickly behind single parents.
Okay, so that is not surprising to any of us. Awesome, thank you, Michelle. So we'll stop sharing that. If you could do it, thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm going to click down to my next. For some reason, I cannot click to close that window. So I still have the rank of risk factors on my screen, and it's not letting me close it. But if you guys don't see it, I guess we're fine. So data, Michelle, so for some reason on my screen, I'm still seeing rank the risk factors. I don't have a way of closing it. I'm not sure why.
Okay, well, we are seeing the data, the common risk factors impacting persistence.
Okay, then I'm not going to worry about it. So the common risk factors that affect persistence, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, are delayed enrollment, being an independent student, the number of dependents you have, being a single parent, lacking your high school diploma, a GED in lieu of a high school diploma. They say that being being a part-time student is a risk factor. Working while enrolled, either working more than 35 hours is a big risk factor, which I know that you guys are all feeling that as well at your institution. So it would be so awesome if I could get this out of my screen. Sorry about this, guys, but for some reason, I've got this right in the middle of my screen, but we're going to just roll with it. So taking all of these different risk factors, we've identified 26 risk factors that we feel affect students' persistence. And when I talk about creating a risk score, this is the scoring model that we use. So we basically take every student and we identify risk factors that they have, and then we add up those risk factors. So like academic background is slightly less than 1, whereas language barrier is also less than 1. All of these different risk factors get combined to create a risk score for a student. And then we customize outreach to students based on their risk score. So a student who has like maybe 0 to 3 might get some proactive outreach, but maybe a little bit less proactive outreach than someone who has a risk score of 6, 7. And generally speaking, for us, it's like 1 to 3, 3 to 5 or 6, and then anyone over 6. And they all get different customized support plans based on their risk factor. But even if you don't do something anywhere near as elaborate as that, again, remember that bell curve. There are going to be some students who have very low risk who are going to succeed with or without you. And there are going to be some students who have very, very high risk who are not going to succeed without a lot of support. And then there's that big group in the middle. So it's a matter of triaging your resources. So you're maximizing your resources by triaging the students' needs to figure out where they are on that bell curve and to provide the support that they need to get through the program. You only have so much time in every day, and you only have so many team members to support your students. And so by knowing really where your students are on that curve, you can customize an approach that supports them. And that gets to Michelle's question of like, what's too much, what's too little. The students who have very low risk, if you call them every week, you're going to agitate them. The students who have very, very high risk, sometimes if you call them every week, you're going to agitate them. So you really have to find that balance with each individual, but knowing where they are on that bell curve is going to be. So this is just a real quick and dirty of a term-to-term retention model. Knowing who started a term, finished a term, and starts the next term is going to help you identify where you are, what's your baseline. And probably everybody out there is already doing this, but if you're not measuring your retention term to term so that you can have sort of bigger chunks of data that you can look at historically, I would encourage you to do that. And so I've got to move my computer, folks. So the when I said earlier, I want you to be granular with how you evaluate retention. I think that if you are not looking at more details than just do they succeed, do they make it to the next term, you're missing out. And that gets us to our next poll, which is what are the different ways that you look at your persistence data? So how do you look at retention? You look at it by when the student started, by their program, by their instructor, like when they dropped out, who was their primary instructor, by their mode of learning, by the term, by the admissions representative who recruited them. So let's give this poll a chance to run through here. It looks like we've got a lot of folks responding very, very quickly. This is the granularity that I was talking about on data. My experience has been, particularly if you can take data and look at it over 3 years, 5 years, when you can identify trends, it gives you an opportunity to fix the things. So all of us know that we have instructors at our institutions who are truly phenomenal, remarkable in person, but they're not as dynamic or phenomenal in a hybrid modality where they have to do some in-class learning and some online learning. And so finding ways to give those instructors some additional coaching or support to improve their online presence is one way to look at it. Or, changing when they hit the students, what phase in the program. So it looks like we've got a few more folks responding, so we'll close the poll in about another 5 seconds or so. But it looks like most of you are looking at the start date or the start month. The program, you're evaluating retention by program, which of course you have to do for ACCSE. A lot of you, half of you are looking at instructors and how different instructors are supporting your students. Mode of learning, about 25% of you by term, which kind of gets to where they are in the program. And by admissions rep, only 20% of you are looking at who was the admissions representative, who was that initial point of contact with these students to evaluate how their students do long-term. That one's a little bit surprising to me because I do think that initial relationship and how that student is seeded into the right program at the right time in their life has such a huge impact on persistence. So we'll end the poll and stop sharing the poll, which this is the problem that I had before. I have no way of stopping that share, but that's okay. So I'm just going to move right along on to the next question. So this gets to that granularity. Um, I implore you, if you're not currently doing it, find different ways of evaluating your students' retention. Um, Look at it by start date, look at it by program, look at it by instructor, look at it by mode of learning, admissions representative. All of these different factors are impacting your students' persistence. So let's talk about people. If you don't do any form of proactive communication with your entire student body at key points in the student life cycle, you are missing out on a huge way of supporting your students. Even if you just add like 3 touch points, one the first month before they start enrolling, like before they enroll, just to check in, another that first week or 2, which are just critical points, and then later in that first term before like large sets of exams or evaluations. Those are some critical periods. We already said earlier today that most of you feel like that first month is the greatest risk for attrition. Increasing your community-based support with proactive and reactive coaching and counseling. So using people to reach out to students and talk to them about how they're doing and support if they hit a risk factor like grades, attendance, et cetera. Most schools are doing that kind of work from my perspective, but if you're not, you should certainly do it. Using that subjective information in conjunction with the objective information to evaluate the risk score. And then following up on any support that you've provided to make sure it had the desired result. Because like, for example, if you refer a student to meet with a mentor or refer a student to tutoring and they don't actually go, they tell you they're going to go, but they don't go, and you don't follow up to say, hey, how did that tutor go? Do you understand the subject matter better? They might not do the thing that they said they would do. They're telling you they're going to do it because they know that's what you want to hear. So that's very critical. And then deploy a student and alumni mentor situation. If you are not utilizing later level students or alumni to support your students, whether they come back as volunteers or they come back as employer representatives or incorporating your employers earlier on in your program, you're missing out on a critical opportunity. Remember, most of your students came to you not because they want to spend however many months it is doing all the hard work to get the education and do the long commute and the homework, juggling family life work balance. They came there because they want the dream, they want the job, they want to be an RN, they want to drive trucks, they want to weld, they want to do the job. And so if you can tie the people who are out there working in the job early in the program, so they're still got their eye on that prize, their eye on that end goal, bring them in at orientation, bring them in for lunch and learns, bring them in as mentors, bring them in that first month when we know our students are at greatest risk for attrition. Celebrate your success early and often, celebrate your students' success, but also celebrate the people who are doing all this hard work. Let them know that they're making a difference. People want to make a difference, right? So your communication plan needs to include this. This was one of the modules, and I know we are getting short on time. We only have about 15 minutes left. And there's no way that I can take, 3 hours, jam it into 1 hour, but I'm sure trying. You want to have a communication plan that uses that preterm support, that early in the program support, flagged outreach for grades, attendance, or other challenges, and then inbound hotlines. So one of the things that we stress to our institutional partners is even if they can't staff an inbound hotline for their students, late into the evenings and on weekends, often admissions is working in the evenings and weekends. There's almost always someone in admissions. And we encourage schools to consider having a triage, like a student helpline, aside from like an IT issue, but have a number they can call where some person who cares is going to answer the call. Because if somebody calls for help and can't reach anyone, that may be that hurdle that causes them to just give up, right? So having inbound hotlines is super helpful. This continues in that proactive outreach, midterm and finals. Again, risk flagged calls, finding ways to communicate in multiple modes. And that gets just to then, this is a really simplified plan which you guys are all, if anyone emails me, I'll send you this PowerPoint, so don't worry about that. This again gets to the technology piece. So students, different people like to communicate different ways, right? I like to talk to people on the phone. I like to talk to people face to face. I read emails. I write emails. I'm happy to text real quick. I'm happy to Insta post with friends or with family. So I like to communicate in a variety of ways, but if you're not meeting your students where they are, whether it's GChat or Snapchat or Insta or TikTok, one client that I've worked with does a lot on TikTok with student testimonials, student videos, and I know there's some risk associated with that. But communicating with people about student success and meeting your students where they are, creating chat rooms, places that they can connect and form community is really, really critical. And depending on the age of the student, I have this great study that was done on how people of different age buckets like to communicate. One thing that's common to every age group, from children all the way up to the oldest community members, everyone is happy to talk to a human being face to face. Like, people like to talk to each other, but in that you can't always talk to someone face to face, you can ask your students their preference. Hey, would you like to join this chat group, or would you prefer that I communicate with you primarily by phone? Our team members that support retention have the opportunity to live chat with students, and they ask them, hey, would you prefer that I email you or call you or live chat with you? And some of them say, oh, I love live chat. And so we have that option to ask your students what their preferences are, and then use your resources to reach out to them at different points. I will also mention, if you don't have like a CRM, a contact relationship management database of some sort at your organization, there's a lot of free ones, even if you don't have the resources to buy one. But scheduling those outreaches that tee off of the student's start date is so easy to do if you have like a database to manage it. So when you are thinking about making a change or adding something, the 5 key steps here are going to be to assess and measure student retention. You've got to do that so you know where you are. You're going to identify your key initiatives. You're going to deploy, design. Sorry, guys, having a little challenge. You're going to design and deploy an implementation plan, and then you're going to have to evaluate, did it work? How did it go, right? If you don't have a process to evaluate what you do, then you might be wasting resources on something that isn't really moving the needle. And so it's really critical to make sure you do have that implementation model and a way to evaluate, is it working? Again, this comes into how do you choose an initiative and figure out how to deploy it. Got to identify the roles of who's going to do it, establish a timeline. How are you going to measure it? Figure out who's responsible. Look at what data do I need? How is it going to be stored? What reporting is necessary? Because if you're choosing to do a new initiative, you really need to lay out the game plan for deploying that initiative so that you can know if it's worth the investment. I can promise you that any expansion of how you communicate with your students, particularly if you do proactive touch points in addition to reactive touch points, none of those initiatives are ever going to backfire on you. They're always going to yield results, as will the addition of incorporating employers and alumni mentors or even later term students into the earlier stage of working with new students. Those initiatives will never backfire on you. So I would like you now to think about just one thing that you have heard today that may feel new to you, or a tweak on something you've been contemplating. We're going to start a poll to talk about one new idea that you can deploy this week or month or quarter. So this is for you more than it is for me. I always feel like when I attend a webinar or a workshop, if I can jot down just one idea, one nugget that is so easy that I could do it this week, it makes me feel like the investment of my time has been super valuable. But if you do jot them down on here, I would love it. I can't make you do it. But it's always nice for me to see what are the nuggets that people have um, grabbed from a workshop. So we'll just give folks a couple of minutes here to share their ideas. And again, if we are able to share the results of this, it will all be anonymized anyway. So I'm not going to say, oh, Michelle said that she's going to buy chocolate bars for everyone in the first week, or unlimited chocolate supply for students in certain classes. We'll anything that people share would be anonymously shared with the community. And while we are waiting for folks' answers to come back, and even if you choose not to share this in our poll, make sure you jot down these nuggets, things you'd like to try, things you'd like to talk to your team about while we're all here together. Because if you've allocated this hour to learn and share, give yourself an assignment to follow up on it, because sometimes we're so busy that we have a great idea and then it gets shuffled to the bottom of the stack. So set some goals for yourself to talk to somebody about something you've heard today, this week, something new you can do this month or this quarter. Michelle?
Well, I was just going to say, I know we're getting towards the end, but we don't have to end exactly at 3. If people need to jump, please do. But we'll go through some of the questions, and if there's anything else that you wanted
Great.
to talk about. I did have a question from one of our participants, and they wanted to know your opinion on the differences between attaining learning results and academic achievement.
Wow, that's huge. So, I always get back to what was the individual's goal for pursuing the degree, certificate, or credential, right? So sometimes, and you see this sometimes in massage, you see it in culinary, you see it in cosmetology for sure, where people want to learn and gain some skills, but they actually don't care about the academic, the certificate, or the credential. And so a challenge with that distinction is if a student is using federal student aid dollars to pursue this educational enrichment, the federal government cares whether you graduate. Your accreditor cares if you graduate. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I think it is a challenge that we face, because a lot of us would like to learn for our own enrichment, our own personal development. But the sticky point is if someone's attending a school and doing a Title IV program, there are benchmarks that have to be hit for that program to retain its eligibility. And so for that lifelong learning concept or those goals, there are other avenues for pursuing some of those, like little shorter term badges and credentials that kind of can fall outside of this. I don't know if I answered the question.
Oh, I understand that. Another question that we had come up, we've gone through these strategies that you've talked about, and I've been listening and I'm ready to dive in. So as soon as I hit end on this webinar, I'm going to move on right into my strategies. What do you think my best first step is? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
I think your best first step is either developing a proactive communication model that happens at various touch points to gather the risk factors. So when you meet a human being and just start talking to them to build rapport, you're going to learn so much about them that's going to help you know how to support them through to their matriculation. So I think coming up with a communication plan so that when you need to call that person and say, hey, you didn't attend class, or hey, your grades are looking terrible, what can I do to support you? They take your call. If the only time you call someone is when they owe you money or when they've missed a class, they don't want to take the call, right? And I'm saying call, but it's the same thing. Like if you say, hey, can you stop by my office? If they know they're in trouble, they don't want to come. But if they've stopped by your office multiple times and you just want to chat and find out how things are going. So I think that proactive communication at regular touch points is critical. And I guess quick runner-up to that is really getting employers and alumni involved early on to keep people focused on the end goal.
Sure. And then, and also another question is, my resources are limited and I don't have a lot to devote to that, but I want to do something. What is something with minimal effort that would have a large impact that I could do?
So from a communication perspective, you can utilize some like free CRMs to like ClickPoint is one that's used in the admissions cycle, but like there are ways to schedule outreach. Like emails are free, texts are virtually free. You can batch text every single person who's starting class next week. Hey, we are so excited to have you come join this Zoom room on this day to learn to play a game and have a chance to win $25 at the bookshop, right? There's ways to get excitement, to bring people together, to build community so people feel like they're nurtured and seen. And you can do it. Text is very inexpensive. Email is inexpensive. People like to win stuff. So like having a lunch and learn where people have a chance to win a $10 gift certificate, that doesn't cost very much money. So there's a lot of ways to recognize people. Another really, really good one is having like a hero board in your campus or some place that people can anonymously say, like, I saw this person doing amazing things this week, and they can be anonymous. And your instructors, you should challenge your instructors to post things on that about students every week. So people want to see, I saw Anna picking up trash in the parking lot. Way to go, Anna. Thank you. Just to build that community and let people know they are seen and that you understand them and that you care, right? So building that community is so critical. And it's cheap. It's cheap. There's so many things you can do that don't cost anything at all.
And I think that theme of community is really it's woven through this entire discussion on retention, the school community, the family community. I think just encouraging one another plays a big part in it. We shared the results, but I'm not sure if you all could see it. But on my back end, some answers that people said that they are going to start this week is to discuss a retention plan, follow up with welcome, and assign group assignments for the students and try additional communication methods. This month, more engagement. Identify employees to create a retention committee. What do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Love it. If you have employers who are willing to join a committee, all of you have, Michelle, help me. What's the name of the committee that they have to have quarterly come and meet at the school? Industry.
Your program advisory committees.
Yes. You've got to have your program advisory committee, right? And those people are great possible sources, or maybe you don't overtax them and you look at places you've placed graduates in the field and ask them to come back, because a graduate is like your greatest work product, right? Someone who graduated, who's working in the field. But they are also someone that your current students can see themselves in more. Like it's easier for one of your current students to see someone who's only a few years out and feel more connected to them because they're like, oh, wow, that person made it through. What challenges they have? And I'm always amazed at the ACCSE PDC when we hear the stories of the different award recipients, the students who have received awards, because they tell their story. And some of these people have so many hurdles that they have overcome to get to where they are that it is just, earth shattering, really. I always get a little weepy. Can't wear mascara on those days. But it is, yeah, I can't see those results either, Michelle, for whatever reason. There's something funky about our poll. I've changed the screen here, not that I'm going to shut down questions. I'm happy to keep answering questions. But I think this is a really poignant statistic. 82% of people who participated in this poll consider recognition an important part of their happiness at work. And of the people who report the highest motivation on the work at their place of work, 94.4% agree that their supervisors or bosses were effective at saying, hey, good job, thank you. I see you. You've made a difference, okay? People want to feel like they've made a difference. Your graduates would love to tell their story. People love to be seen and heard and understood. And your current students, this is not just happiness at work, but your students need to feel that they are seen, that you see them, and that you recognize their hard work. You recognize that it's not easy to do what they're doing, right? So recognition and then celebration. You've got to celebrate, and celebration doesn't have to cost anything. One school that I work with said that they asked each faculty and staff person, what's something that you could give that we could auction off and raise money for a charity? And so like one person baked a cake, one person gave a piano lesson, and they donate all these like little things that cost them nothing because it's something they're giving of themselves. And then they get auctioned off, and then the money goes to charity. But another school said, well, we don't want to sell anything. They auctioned them off like to silent auctions. And then the students got these experiences with the faculty and staff at the school that built those bonds again, build that community. And all of that kind of stuff is free. It doesn't cost anything, makes them feel connected to each other, makes them feel connected to all of you, and also give them someone that they feel like they can talk to, right? That's so important, because when any of us have been up against a wall where we're stressed or anxious or scared, knowing that there's someone who has called you just to check in makes you feel more comfortable just calling them to say, hey, I'm kind of stumbling here. I'm kind of a little bit at a loss, right? Maybe that person isn't your instructor. Maybe that person is just a friendly person from student services, or maybe it is your admissions rep that has checked on you periodically, just, hey, how's it going? Just a quick text. And I'm saying, like, there are programs that you can buy or use for free where you can send batch text. So like if I'm an admissions rep and I had 50 of my students enroll on March 1st, I could schedule a text to go to all 50 of them that says, hey, just checking in. I know you're 2 weeks into your first term. Hope things are going well. I'm never more than a phone call away if you have questions. You know, I know you can do it, right? And it takes that admissions rep like no time to develop this text and send it to 50 people or 100 people or 10 people. So anyway, celebrate your successes and recognize people for their contributions, both your students and your employees. So this is my contact information. My email is there. As I shared, I'm happy to send the PowerPoint to be zipped up in a PDF format. If anyone sends me an email, I'm happy to do that. I do also, I guess Michelle could just send it to the whole reg list. That might be easier.
I can absolutely do that. And we can also post it on our website along with the webinar recording.
Oh, great. That's a better way than me responding to 237 emails today.
Yes.
But what other questions have come up, Michelle, that you see? Are there any others? I know we're at the top of our hour here.
Well, I'm seeing some that, and honestly, it looks like we've already gone on to answer them when we talked about with accomplishing more with a smaller staff or team. And I think you really touched on that with just doing those small little free things, really.
Yes. Yeah. And I do also think that your staff, everyone feels like they have a lot to do, and I never discount that. But when we are all doing this for the students, right? We none of us will have jobs if we don't support students through to graduation and working in the field and providing those students with a really great experience. And so I think helping people see that we're not asking them to take on another full-time job. We're asking them to do just some small bit. And whether you do this through like small committees that work on, maybe you take the three main areas, like the data area, and you make a small work group to talk about data. Are we measuring things well? Is there a way we can be measuring it better? Is there a report that IT could run for us out of a database so we're not always crunching numbers, right? The people, could we form some little committees that focus on certain aspects of the student life cycle? And then, deploying what are the risk factors and how do you support those risk factors is super critical, right? Knowing how to do that. And then maybe looking at some of these free communication tools, whether it's batch texting or a Slack account or TikTok or whatever you want to do, but think about more creative ways to change your communication, to make it multimodal, and to do some of that heavy lifting for you. It's a great way to think about your next steps. So I am always so happy to be with ACCSC and this wonderful community that I feel like I've been a part of for like 25 years or so. And for those of you who don't know this, in 1989, I was hired by the National Association of Trade and Technical Schools. I was hired by a guy named Bob James, who worked at ITT, which is long gone, to work in the government relations department under a guy named Stephen Blair. And at that time, NATS and what is now the Accrediting Commission, ACCSC, were all one big happy family, and we all worked in the same office over on Wisconsin Avenue. And so I worked with some of the people who are still involved with ACCSC to this day, back in those old days before the trade association was spun out to be what is now CQ. So my heart is very connected to this community and to all of you. And I plan to see you in Long Beach, California, September 25th to 27th at the Hilton in Long Beach. And I understand from a little bird on my shoulder that the registration portal will be open by the end of the month or first of next month.
A little bit.
Or maybe just, within the month.
Right, exactly. And Elizabeth, I'll just say that we are overjoyed to have you as a part of our community. You've come and visited our staff a lot as well. And I hope that many of you would agree that when you interact with our staff, you see what a tight-knit group that we are. And we thank you for helping to foster that with us. But for all of you who are still with us, 199 of you I see, thank you all for being with us. I hope you got lots of notes. We'll be recording this webinar. We're going to upload it to our brand new website. If you haven't checked it out, it'll be under the training and resources section. And that will also be where we'll provide a PDF of Elizabeth's presentation today. We'll also have future webinars. And as Elizabeth mentioned, the PDC is coming up in Long Beach. We're currently accepting session proposals. So if you have any ideas that you really want to share with this community, maybe it's on retention. Maybe you develop some ideas. Maybe you're going to start something this week and it went so well that you want to tell other people about it. We want to hear about it. So submit your session proposal, and your first chance for registration coming later this spring. I know today's the first day, but give me some time and we'll get it launched for you. But again, Elizabeth and everyone here, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar, and we will see you all again real soon. Thank you.